everybody. Welcome to Freethought in Florida. Freethought in Florida is a production of the Atheist community of Polk County. I'm Sarah Ray. I'm one of the directors of the ACPC, and joining me today is Taylor Aguilera with Equality Polk. Taylor, thanks for coming in and being on the show.
For having me, Sarah.
Oh, I don't have your microphone on.
Hey,
there you go.
Hello.
Now you're here.
Thank you for having me.
So we just did a whole recording for my podcast talking about some things that are going on with Equality Polk and things that are happening here in the state and nationally as it relates to equal rights. So I don't want to cover entirely the same ground, but let's sort of maybe start off in the same place with just a little bit about you and Equality Polk and what that's all about.
Yeah. So I am one of the founding members of Equality Polk. I'm a mother. I've got 2 children, a college student at Hillsborough Community College. I am a field organizer for the Florida Democratic Party and the president of the Polk County Young Democrats.
You've got a lot going on.
Yes.
What are you going to school for? I didn't ask that.
Yeah, I'm currently working on my associate's degree for political science.
Okay, that makes sense.
Knock on wood, this is my last semester. It's taken so long,
Mm-hmm.
but I've been doing it part-time because life is happening.
Right. Yes, and because you have a lot going on.
Yes.
So just a general sort of baseline, I guess. So what we've all been working towards is there are no protections at the federal or state level for workplace housing and public accommodations for gender identity and sexual orientation. And that's something that equal rights advocates have been working for years. But we're still sort of holding out on that. And there's what I think is interesting is, thinking about what the opposition to that sort of legislation is, where that comes from. And for a lot of people in the non-religious community, I think we often immediately go to, well, who are the people that show up with the protest signs, right? It's generally religious folks.
Right.
And perhaps generally a specific flavor of, let's not broad brush. It's not all religious folks. And so I thought maybe that would be an interesting way to frame this discussion for this show is to talk about the faith community as far as, is there support that we're seeing from faith leaders, from churches, from, just the general membership. What does that look like when you set that up against the people of faith who are in opposition to, and maybe some messaging around, why would a people of faith or faith leaders, why should they be supportive of this kind of stuff? So I left that very open-ended. Take that any which direction you'd like.
Okay, so we have a faith council, a faith leaders council, and it's currently chaired by Heather Norby, who is the spiritual life director at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Lakeland. I'm a member of that congregation. So she has been utilizing her network of LGBT affirming faith leaders and recruiting them for the cause, as I like to say. And we have another woman, not sure she wants to be named, so I'll leave her out of it, but she has connections with LGBT affirming Catholic communities. And when we talk about strong faiths, at least here in the South, Baptists and the Catholics carry some weight.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the Westboro Baptist Church that likes to protest our Pride events, and they actually protested my graduation.
What?
Yeah.
That's insane.
So when we think about that, when the Unitarian Universalists show up to the city council and say, hey, we want this human rights ordinance passed, they're like, who the hell are you?
Right.
Nobody knows who we are, which we're working on. And but if a Baptist stands up and says, this is bad, and then a Catholic stands up and says, wait a minute, this is okay,
right,
that brings some weight to the conversation. So we're targeting more mainstream type religions that can have a dog in the fight, so to speak.
This is somewhat unrelated, but I mentioned this at our last meeting. I talked about Project Blitz, which is a very insidious effort by religious nationalists to install, Christian privilege in our law and state by state, and to sort of change the narrative that this is a Christian nation and always has been from the start. There is the Baptist Joint Committee does a podcast. It's the Baptist Joint Committee on Religious Liberty. Religious liberty. Great podcast. I would recommend anybody to listen to this. They did a 10-episode series about Project Blitz last fall, and they've started a new one that they're calling Respecting. It's called Respecting Religion. Yeah. Which is they're sort of looking at the Establishment Clause and what does that mean to them as people of faith, and how do you sort of read that in an era where there are people who are trying to legislate privilege for Christians, and they are very much in opposition to that idea, right? Like, so there are people of faith out there who get that separating religion and government is a good thing for their religion.
Right.
And I think in a lot of the things that we're trying to do at the ACPC, it's finding those faith leaders and, we getting out of the bubble and, not like, I have to be willing to go in, have a conversation with these people and say, look, I know you don't let women be clergy, and I know you don't let gay people be whatever, and I disagree with that. But if you agree that there shouldn't be a law that says this, or that you support a law that says X, then we should be able to find that common ground and at least come together. I will stand on the steps of City Hall with you in a joint proclamation supporting or opposing something that we agree on. I would be happy to do that as a leader of the atheist community. And they're out there, and it's just a matter of finding them. But I think, to your point, when the atheists come out, and we have a banner that we put in our Pride booth that says, when equality is under attack, atheists show up. And we will. And there's, I can make the case for why we should care about equality when it comes to GSRM folks. But the case to be made for why faith leaders should be on board with this it is another case to be made entirely. And I don't think that here, let me, the atheist, tell you why you should care. It's getting the affirming leaders to be vocal about it.
Yeah, and we've been kind of following on the coattails of Polk Pride. So Polk Pride has various faith type events where it is affirming faith leaders coming together for whatever the message is. And we're following those events and showing up to those events so we can network. Because even though we have a pretty good idea as far as Polk County goes, who is and who isn't, we don't want to leave any stone unturned. So we don't want to assume anything. And Polk Pride has done a wonderful job at creating networking type events, so we can find those faith leaders.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things that when we monolith other groups, right? When we're in our tribes, and we think about the things that that's an oxymoron, right? Like the gay Christian or the gay Republican, that idea is somehow so cognitively dissonant that such a thing couldn't possibly exist. Like, how could you be a woman and be a conservative, or you know what I mean?
Right.
Like those kinds of things. And yet there are people who exist in those spaces.
Yeah, we're actively trying to find gay Republicans.
Yeah.
We are a nonpartisan organization, and there are partisan people involved, including myself, but we recognize that this issue is way bigger than partisanship.
Yep.
And so we are actively trying to find some gay Republicans that will come on board with us. Fortunately, a lot of us are kind of stuck in our Democratic communities, so it's a lot of
it's hard to get
tucking
out
your
and
pride in your back pocket and being
Yeah.
like, all right, like it's going to take both sides of the aisles coming
Yep.
together, non-faith and faith, Democrat and Republican, to move the ball forward.
Yep. What are some of the other things? I know this is sort of the central focus of the group. Let's say we get all of these. Let's say we get legislation passed, we get ordinances passed. What does the organization sort of then become? Is there like a secondary set of goals? Are there other things that are in the hopper to fight for?
There's some in the hopper, none that have been really, fleshed out or talked about. We're kind of taking this one bite at a time. But I know there's been interest about having an LGBT chamber of commerce. So we know which businesses support us and which ones to support in turn. I know I have this crazy dream of like, when you go to Tampa, Miami, Orlando, there's pride flags all the time, not just in June. I would love to see that here. I mean, we don't even get pride flags in June. So my big dream is to be able to find probably partnering with this dream chamber of commerce of like, okay, Black and Brew coffee shop, you get to put pride flags in your window year round. And we just know that that's a safe place.
Right.
Those are just some pipeline dreams, nothing that's been fleshed out. But I think it'd be so much fun to have that neighborhood around here.
Yes, absolutely. Just some other maybe sort of not completely unrelated or dissimilar topics, some things that are in the news that I just have been sitting on my mind. The Equal Rights Amendment that we have been again, decades in the making. 38 states had been required to amend the Constitution, and last month Virginia became that 38th state to ratify the ERA. But there's an article from Vox talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, my hero, who basically said, so there is, when the ERA was proposed, they put a time limit, time constraint on when all of this the state ratifications had to be met, and now the House is demurring on that. But RBG is saying that's something that we should at least consider, that, hey, that was the rules, and even some states have changed their mind and rescinded their ERA. So if we're going to count the new ones coming in just now, we also have to subtract the ones who, took theirs away. And so where does that leave us on the 38? So there's a lot of things going on in regards to that. And I think she's made the case for hit reset and start over, which is a crazy thing to me. When we talk about, and sort of the underlying thread in all of this that I'll sort of come back to is, when we think about a lot of the things that we champion, a lot of the causes that we care about, as humanists, the opposition tends to come from a place of religion. And so that's sort of the thread, I think, that ties these all together. There's another big story going on here in the state with scholarships and vouchers for that take money away from public schools and give them to private, often religious organizations, religious schools. And the Sentinel, they have a team who has done some tremendous work on bringing light to some of the issues that causes. Right? We have a Blaine Amendment, which is now being cast in a very sort of anti-Catholic light, and however it was brought about originally, what it says is that no public funds go to religious purpose. At the end of the day, that's really all it means. And so, yes, it uses the word sectarian, and that's code for, and I get it, but what it means is that you as a taxpayer should not have to fund someone else's religious education. And yet, in the state of Florida, we're throwing money by the thousands at these voucher programs that take money directly from the tax from the Treasury and put it toward religious purpose. And one of the things that came out of the Sentinel's investigations, which the Ledger has started to pick up on, is these schools that are receiving all of this money, many of them have policies against LGBTQ students and staff and so on. So this is from Gary White, who I'll tell you a fun story about the coverage that he did on us when we first started our organization, because that was fun. But he writes, about 70% of students at Winter Haven Christian School are on the Florida tax credit scholarships. Statement of faith policy posted on the website lists, quote, any form of homosexuality, among a list that also includes bestiality and incest as sinful perversions of God's gift of sex. Lakeland Christian has about 1,100 students. 105 of those are on scholarships. Their statement of faith on the website notes that any conduct intended to adopt a gender other than one's birth gender is immoral. And then we have some commentary from our legislators. Kelly Stargell, who is the State Senate Education Appropriations Chair, said, I've not heard of any student who's been denied an opportunity to go to school. There have not been any complaints that I've been made aware of kids that have been denied. And State Representative Colleen Burton of Lakeland said she doesn't think the state should block schools with potentially restrictive policies of students' sexuality from receiving Florida tax credit scholarships money. So now we have entangled in, not only are we giving taxpayer dollars to religious purpose, which is sort of the entry door for the atheist community to get interested and involved, but now we're allowing them to be discriminatory with that money too. And so that's something that, we as an organization have been very vocal about. But I think that comes back to, again, like, okay, where are the more moderate leaders in the religious community that should be quoted in all of these articles too, saying, yeah, you shouldn't be doing that? Who are they? Where are they? How many of them are there? Is that a rarity? Are they out there and they have that opinion but are afraid to say it in public?
Yeah, I grew up in a Southern Baptist church my entire childhood and youth. And one thing I remember very vividly, my mom always kept me civically involved. I would go with her to vote. She took me to pro-life rallies, to George Bush rallies. She really didn't see the pendulum coming in my direction, but she nevertheless, like she kept me civically engaged. And I specifically remember an instance. Must have been like 8 or 9 years old, and it was around voting time. And I remember asking a girl at Sunday school, I'm like, "Did your parents vote?" And my mom yanked me up out of that Sunday school room. She was a Sunday school teacher, and like pulled me in the hallway and like was like, "We don't talk about that at church. We'll lose our faith. We'll lose our rights." Like, all hell was breaking loose outside the Sunday school classroom. And so that's something that like I tucked in my back pocket. So I think a lot of these organizations, these Christian organizations, were probably, taught we don't get involved with politics and LGBT rights, unfortunately, even though we understand it's a human rights issue, is a political issue to the masses. So they kind of want to stay away from it for one reason or another, is the way that I see it, as at least in conservative Polk County.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but that's a really good point. I'm not going to be able to think of it now, so I'm going to move on. And the other thing that we saw happen, so these scholarships are partially funded by tax dollars, and then they're also supported by by corporations. And so Wells Fargo, Wyndham, announced that they would stop donating to that program. Fifth Third Bank also announced some plans, but then I guess they kind of reversed that. But so maybe there's some pressure coming from the corporate world of, the whole thing about this sort of discriminatory policies and stuff is, and maybe, I don't know, maybe this is an oversimplification that we trot out too often, but replace any of those words with black.
Right.
And would it be okay? Because your policies at these schools say that you don't discriminate on the basis of race, creed, like, again, we're back to the whole Civil Rights Act, and, is it a specific list of covered classes, or is it an example of covered classes? And so it blows my mind that, in 2020, if someone were to say, that being black or brown was an abomination against God and you're not allowed to come to our school, we would be rioting in the streets.
Right.
But if it's a gay kid, well,
yeah.
Do we need to, respect their faith? We have to respect other people's beliefs.
Well, I mean, even in our public school system, while they might not trot it around on their website as the private schools have, we have teachers that can get fired because they're LGBT. I have a number of friends who are public school teachers that, I trying to encourage them to be more out, but they're terrified that they're going to get fired.
Yep.
I mean, think about it might have been last year, and Billy Townsend got in some trouble for standing up for the kid who, I believe he had lesbian parents, and the bus driver refused to ride.
Yes. Yep.
Like these things happen in our public school systems too. So this really ties back to human rights ordinances.
Yes.
And offering those protections, because our dollars are going to both sides of the school system. And if we're going to raise hell about one, we better raise hell about the other one.
For sure. And longtime viewers of this show will know, but I'll share with you and for anyone new, one of the very first things that our organization did when we founded was, it was actually today is the 1 year anniversary. Happy birthday. Happy anniversary, atheist community. So one of the very first things we did was write some letters to the Polk County school board members because at graduations last year, there were Gideon Bible distributions during graduation practices, where you would cross the stage and go down the steps, and there was a strange man with a Bible to hand to you, and congratulations and good luck with your future. God bless you. At a public school graduation practice. And then at the graduations themselves, they had some very Christian prayers that were part of the program too. And so after having been sent numerous letters from the Freedom from Religion Foundation saying hey, stop it. Right. But now there's community members who are engaged and aware, and we're going to call you out on that. But at the same time, we're not discriminating on who we support and who we call out. When the school board gets it right, we call them out on that too and say, hey, good one on that one. You got that one right. We still need to sit down and talk about this other stuff that you haven't fixed yet, but good one on that. We support that. And so I've written several opinion pieces supporting some of the things that that the school board and the public school system has been doing too. But yeah, it's if anything is to be learned from all of this, I think it is diversity, and it's the diversity of opinion and background, and we all come from such different places. And the thing that humanism teaches us is that despite all of that, we are far more alike than we are different. And if we can get that together and bring that in and focus that on things that matter, then we get things done. And so anyway, I think for me, it comes back to, again, the vision that a lot of people have that when we go out to fight for equal rights, whether it's the ERA, whether it's the queer community, whether it's the abortion bills that are being passed, that a lot of times all of that stuff is coming from a place of religion. And so it very quickly seems like it's like we set up that us versus them. We set up that it's the religious people versus. And I think we need to find those other religious voices and help them not be so afraid to not politic, right? But to at least be able to speak out and say, this is an issue. No bill numbers, but on this issue, this is where we stand, and this is how we justify it with our God and our morality and all of that stuff. That stuff needs to be, I think, put out more.
Yeah, I agree 110%.
Okay, so let's make this a short one. I'm waiting on somebody to come work on my windshield if he actually ever shows up. Because I get, travel on I-4. I got 2 rocks in 1 week. Bastards. And we've had power outages today for some strange reason. So I hope that doesn't happen again. So let's do this. Let's just talk a little bit about where Equality Polk is going from here. Talk about how people can get involved and, what sort of looking for matching talent to needs, what sorts of things you're looking for.
Yeah, so our next meeting is on Tuesday, February 25th, 7 p.m. at 3140 Troy Avenue in Lakeland. At our meeting, we're going to be evaluating which city council we're targeting. So we're going to evaluate some data and resources and, who lives in the city limits of here and there and make a decision. We're very calculated about this and everything is just very organized and laid out. So this is not a sprint to get a human rights ordinance passed. It's a marathon. And we're taking it one city at a time. So we have, I think it's 11 cities or municipalities in Polk County. So we have 11 of these processes that have to take place. So what it looks like timeline wise is, we've already got our group together, and we're still open to adding members. We have some committees that we formed as far as education goes. So when we get ready to talk to our city councils, we'll learn how to get our message out in an elevator speech of 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
We have a faith leaders council that will find our faith leaders who are affirming. Mental health. We have some people that can give us some mental health perspective when we're talking to city council, business leaders, policy leaders, and activism. So the public
Yes.
support segment where we're writing letters and calling and
Yep.
protesting if we need to.
Yep.
Those are all different sections that we need help with. So we've got our committees formed and we're open to new people joining them. We're getting ready to find out which city council we're going to target. We're going to form our human rights ordinance, and it's going to be tailored specifically to that community's needs. And then we got to find a sponsor. So we got to map out our city council and figure out who's close
support.
Close to saying yes.
Yep.
And meet with them one-on-one, and they're going to help us map out the rest of the council. So they might say, hey, I don't know, James Brown, he's cool. He might be a swing vote.
Right.
And then we put our public support on letter writing to James Brown. And we get the public support drummed up and get put on the agenda, and hopefully it's passed. If not, we start back from square one and keep rolling with it.
And just briefly, one of the things that we had talked about earlier on the other show is Davenport and Haines City, that those efforts had been sort of made and it didn't have a super positive outcome. But if nothing else, then the conversation happened. It's out there in the ether now, and people are more aware of the need for it and the issues around it. And so when we come back and say, okay, we need to address this again, let's pick up where we left off, then we're not starting quite at the starting block. We're a little farther ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just can't take no for an answer anymore. we have to assert ourselves. We have to be visible so people know that we're not,
Mm-hmm.
freaks of nature or whatever you want to call it. I'm sure we've both been called every name in
Well,
the book.
let me say that. So, I mean, I alluded to it earlier, but when I do have to make the case for, why does an atheist care, or a humanist, or a skeptic, or a agnostic, or however you identify yourself, a person of non-faith, why do we care about this? There's sort of two answers that generally come out, and one is that, again, when these things are brought up, generally speaking, the opposition comes from a religious place, and so it's in these cases, when you look at the schools, when you look at discrimination in housing and employment and public accommodations, a lot of that stuff is written as a religious exemption to discriminate. So one of the bills that we had been following, and I won't be able to think of it now because my brain's mush, but it was a bill that we generally saw as favorable. You know what? I know where it is. I can look it up real quick. It was a bill that we had generally seen as favorable, except that it had a rider in it that allowed religious exemptions. And so, do you support that as is? Do you support it and say, look, we need the protections now and we can deal with the religious bullshit later? And so that's sort of one answer, is we're opposing religious privilege in law. But also, asking any atheist who is particularly someone who's come from a faith tradition and deconverted, particularly someone who is in a rural conservative area like this, what's it like being an atheist? And you'll hear a lot of the same things that you'll hear if you ask, hey, what's it like being gay in a place like this? What's it like being trans in a place like this? What's it like? You hear a lot of the same things. It's a minority community that's marginalized, that's treated as other, that's seen as immoral and bad. And so that's that common ground that we can come together on. And in our community, even if you're not gay, you know what it feels like to be treated that way. And so you have to come with us on this journey because we need you. You have to.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And if you're atheist, like you still have you still have other sections of your life that are like very useful for the cause.
Oh, yeah.
We're using one of those resources right now.
Yep.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah. My pleasure.
So even if you're not comfortable because the religious cronies are out, harassing you, like you can be a business owner.
Sure.
You can be a political leader. You can help share our cause on Facebook at the very least. You still have a dog in this fight. We need everybody, and I can't stress that word enough.
Yep. And if you can do nothing else, if you're feeling like you're in a place where you just can't be out about your support or whatever it is, know that there are people out here who are doing it and will do it for you. Until you can. And we're going to make this a safe place for you to be able to speak openly about it. So much of this stuff is like, it's kitchen table conversations. It's, Uncle Jim at Thanksgiving dinner who's saying some hateful, homophobic shit that you should be able to speak out and say, hey, dude, don't talk like that. That's not cool. And we'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get there. But we're going to have to do it together. And so that I'll leave the show today with that rallying cry. Whether you're part of the community or not, you're part of the community. Come along this ride with us. Get involved. You said the meeting next Tuesday it's at the Unitarian Universalist Church, right?
Yes. Tuesday, the February 25th, 7 p.m., 3140 Troy Avenue. Connect with us on Facebook too. We have a Facebook group. I'll accept your request, and you can, even if you can't physically get involved or you're not sure when the right time to jump in is, like, follow us and we'll help you get there.
Absolutely. And we need all different skills and knowledge and backgrounds in order to get this stuff going and get people protected. So, Taylor, thank you again for coming in and doing 2 shows today. This is fun. We'll have to have you back on one or other or both and talk about more things because I have so much I want to talk to you about.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And that's going to do it for this episode of Freethought in Florida. Freethought in Florida is a production of the Atheist community of Polk County, a 501c3 nonprofit Florida organization. And we'll see you next time.